When my good-hearted father-in-law dropped me off outside the double chain link fence with razor wire at the top at the Raybrook Federal Correctional Institution near Lake Placid, New York, I was about to walk into the most diverse community I would ever live in. My neighbor next door, in the cell next door, was a Chinese American who learned English while he was in prison. One of my best friends that I got to know over the 4 years that I spent in Raybrook was a guy who had flipped out one day when he found his best man from his wedding in bed with his wife, and he wound up shooting a cop. And the cop didn't die, fortunately, but my friend spent some 28 years in state and federal prisons. One of my other best friends was a black man from Philadelphia that we bonded on the softball field. He saw me playing. He was an umpire. He was about my age, and he was umpiring the softball game. And he saw me diving for ground balls and running after foul pop flies and just playing like I was 12 years old. And he just laughed and said, "Man, I got to get some of what you're taking." And we just became dear, dear friends. I walked with him on the compound when his son was taken to prison himself. One of my other good friends was a guy brilliant man, who had a serious, I think it was cocaine habit, and wound up robbing banks, and one day shot up, had a semi-automatic weapon, shot up the roof, the ceiling of a bank, and scared the hell out of everybody, and got sent to prison for a long time, where he led AA programs and NA programs and did yoga and got several degrees. I was an orderly in the visiting room. I cleaned up the visiting room after visiting hours, and I got to be good friends with a young black man from, I can't remember where he was from. Really intelligent guy, singing all the time. And he told me the story one day of how in the gang that he was a part of, I don't even know if it was an official gang, but the crowd he ran with, you just had to stick up for yourself if you were disrespected. So he stood up for himself, and he shot and killed somebody, and spent countless hours in the law library trying to find his way, some way that he could spend at least some part of his life outside of prison. Another guy I knew, I think he was from South Carolina. His name was Cedric Dean. And he never told me everything that he had done, but he had been seriously involved in gangs and drugs. And I didn't ask the details, but I know there were some bodies in his closet, people that he had likely killed or been a part of killing. And he was also a brilliant guy and turned his life around in prison and wrote books and taught classes for other inmates. And eventually, after spending probably thousands of hours in the law library studying, even though the judge had tried to send him away for life and had declared when he sentenced him that you would never get out of prison, this guy got out of prison. So many different stories, so many different people. These were the people I lived with. These were the people I was friends with. I played softball, as I just told you, and one of the guys I played against had apparently been some bigwig in the Italian mafia in New York City, but he was just a guy I played softball with, and we got to be friends and we talked. One day I was sitting in chow at the table where I sat, and the guy next to me had just come in on the bus, and I heard him talking to somebody else, and I realized that he was one of the people years ago who had bombed abortion clinics, and I never got to know him, but these were the people that I lived with. And when I first walked in those fences, one of the guys in my unit, a white guy, kind of took me under his wing and said, "Look, you want to keep your head down here. Don't talk to anybody, just keep to yourself, because everybody's gonna try to exploit you, and everybody's gonna try to mess with you, and even they find out you're a nice guy and they'll take advantage of you and this and that." And he impressed on me that I should be scared. And his reasoning was, you know that feeling you get when you're in a big city and it's late at night and you're scared because you don't know who might be out there and what they might do to you? Well, guess what? All those guys came here. So he was trying to scare me into closing in to self-protection. But something in me knew that wasn't going to be my way. Something in me just said, no, this isn't what I came here for. And something in me knew I just wanted to stay open to this, that this was my community now. These were going to be my friends, the guys I played softball with, the guys we shared homemade nachos with, to watch the Super Bowl in prison, whatever it was. These were my friends. These were my buddies. These are guys I walked the track with when their mom died or their brother died, or they found out that their youngest brother had just caught a charge and was on his way to prison himself. Just all the things that you deal with in prison. So this was my community. These were my friends. And I used to tell people when I got out that I learned more in my 4 years of prison than I certainly learned in 4 years of college. And it wasn't even close. The lessons, the experiences, the stories I heard of what people's lives had been like. A Sri Lankan guy, I think it was Sri Lanka, who had been living in Toronto and was accused of some kind of terrorism, which he staunchly admitted he had never participated in. And of course, no way for me to know, but a brilliant guy. An Indian guy, a guy from India who was brilliant, probably one of the smartest, most highly intelligent people I've ever met, worked in computers and had been accused of some sort of computer fraud crime, stealing trade secrets or something, which, again, he said he did not do. But here he was in prison, and I got to know him. So much of this. And I realized as time went on, the more I kind of unwound from the experiences that I had been through that led me to prison, I realized some of what I'd been through was just, there was a lot of stuff tangled up in me. So I decided, well, there's a prison psychologist. I'm going to make an appointment to talk to the prison psychologist, who turned out to be this just amazing Puerto Rican woman who had one of the biggest hearts I've ever met. She was just so unbelievably kind to me and kind to everyone I ever saw her speak with. And here she was in prison, keeping an open heart. And I decided, and I knew right from the beginning, that that's what I wanted to do as well. And that was perhaps my first lesson. That in a place where everybody tells you you should just close down and keep your head down and not talk to people about your crime, and certainly not ask them about theirs. I decided I was going to stay open. I was going to stay open in this community. I was going to stay open to what every single one of these men and the few women like this psychologist and a few guards that I got to know, that I was going to stay open to what I could learn in this. And this time, and not only was I going to stay open to the other people there, I was going to stay open to my own experience. I was going to stay open to what I felt. I was going to stay open to the shame that I felt for what I had done, for the remorse, for the that I felt for the people who had been harmed by my foolishness. I was going to stay open. If I felt depressed, I was just going to go to the root of that depression. If I had a conflict with one of my fellow inmates, I wasn't just about being a pushover. I was open, but if somebody would cross me or start to violate me, I remember there was a guy, I was walking the track one day and I happened to be by myself, and this guy fell in next to me. This was right after I'd been featured on an episode of American Greed. And this guy fell in step beside me and started talking to me. And it's not really that common behavior in prison to just come up to somebody you don't know like that in such a forward way. But he started talking to me, just making small talk. And I'm kind of wondering, okay, this is prison. I know this guy wants something, but what is it? And so he started talking, and finally, oh, this guy actually wants me to teach him how to run a con, how to run a fraud, how to get money out of people. When I finally realized it, I laughed out loud, and I said, oh man, you got me all wrong. I'm sorry, I can't help you, buddy. But I was actually trying to repay people. In fact, I'm still trying to pay people, even from prison. And he looked at me like I was the craziest SOB he'd ever seen. And he found an excuse pretty soon to walk away. So I learned things in prison. I learned things about myself. I learned things about this incredibly diverse group of human beings. And so maybe the first lesson of what I learned in prison was to stay open, no matter what, no matter where, no matter what is going on in me, to stay open to that, to no matter who I'm around, to stay open to that. And that openness has never really closed. Even now that I'm out of prison, I'm more open. Once those doors open, for me at least, they never closed. So I'm grateful that I learned how to open in a place where your instincts and other people and where fear and conditioning all try to say that you should stay closed. All right, my plan is to talk more about my experiences in prison and some of what I learned there. Thanks for listening to this one. If you like it, please feel free to like and subscribe, send me a comment, and if you want to come back, I hope to have more of these soon. Thank you so much for listening.